Shalom and welcome to another edition of Parsha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malamet in Highland Park, New Jersey, at the Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation, Anshe Emet, and joining me, my good friends, Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanowski, the father of the Chatan. Mazel Tov to Jeremy, Rabbi Barry J. Chesler. We were at Rabbi Kalmanowski's son's wedding, marrying Ariel Balsam this past Sunday. Viewers, we have a picture of the three of us here on the Parsha Talk here. This is your Parsha Talk bros, the men of Parsha Talk. We're going to have a calendar. Exactly.
Oh, that's good.
What a great
the month of the mighty.
I'll tell you something. We had so much fun rejoicing with you and wishing the Chatan and Kala such a beautiful life together. It was a gorgeous moment. Lots of simcha to you, Damien, the family. Everybody it was just wonderful. And thank you for having us there. We got to meet, Jeremy, we tell you this, we got to meet your parents, who are big fans of Parsha Talk. They love Parsha Talk. And they told
us, Bubby and Zadie, nice to have you with us today.
They told us about people in their community. There's a fellow, I'll give him a shout out, named Ivan, who is a big fan.
Yes, Ivan, their neighbor and sort of a cousin by marriage. So Ivan watches Parsha Talk all the time. So
religiously, and we're gonna give him a big shout out. Thank you for watching us. We are so honored, and I had conversations with other people, including some rabbis, who say that they take our Parsha Talk and use it, but they attribute some of the Divrei Torah to what we say here, which is really that's the ultimate honor, is to be quoted in someone else's sermon. I've quoted you, both of you guys, in my sermons, so I've learned a lot from you.
I thank you guys for all the good wishes, and thank you for celebrating. It was just, I got to say, here we are on Wednesday. Wedding was Sunday. Monday, simply exhausted, couldn't move, but still 72 hours later, still feeling amazingly joyful. Haven't come down yet.
That's great.
By the way, Ivan, our friend and listener, Ivan he's retired. He's an older person, but he's an incredibly skilled professional cartoonist.
Wow.
And we should ask him.
Oh, he's watching.
Perhaps for a logo. A logo.
The three of us in the screen. Okay. And so there are so many others who are watching, and we just, thank you. Thank you for spending this time with us. This is an amazing Parsha, the double Parsha, Vayakhel Pekudei, ending up the book of Shmot. It's also a special Shabbat this week, Shabbat Hachodesh, precisely because we announced the month of Nisan next week. Nisan is coming on Thursday. Don't want to preempt the announcement, but that's what it is. It's on the calendar. Anybody could see it. And that means that we're already in Pesach mode. I'll tell you how I'm in Pesach mode. I brought up my special shelves, and I signed off on my Passover. I'm late on the Passover guide, the schedule, and all the things that you need to do, the sale of chametz form, that things I should have finished weeks ago. But this is where we are. We're really in Pesach mode, but we're not going to think about Pesach right now. We want to think about the end of the Shmot, and I want to put out this idea to discuss, and that is that the end of this book has a certain air of exuberance to it, in the sense that the sanctuary is constructed and completed. And I read, especially chapter 40, it's almost like a song. And I actually think it was originally a song that encoded the memory of this structure, so that people would have it with them in their imagination, even if it wasn't with them in reality. So the question that is bothering me is, well, last week we read about the greatest debacle in the experience of Israel in the desert, namely the golden calf. And it was huge. It was a convulsion, a rupture. it resulted in the breaking of the tablets. It resulted in a whole reset of the people, and resulted also in I think an act of violence that we don't pay attention to as much as we should, in which 3,000 people are killed by an act of zealous violence of the Levites that are unleashed within the community. And it seems after all of that, and the second set of commandments come down, and there's a certain reverence for Moses, and Moses, people are afraid of him, and people are, stand at their tents and rise out of their tents when he comes out of his place. There's a new sense in the people. And now we read, this exuberant chapter, and I'm going like, okay, so is there an echo of that somewhere? And there's got to be. And is there an echo of that in Judaism? And I'm saying that with, reading the Torah, but I'm also, we're 5,000 miles away from Israel now. There's, I quoted the Buffalo Springfield song last week. There's something happening here. There's something is going on. There are tremendous forces within Israel, and I think within the Jewish people that are in a collision. And is that inevitable? And was the golden calf inevitable? And where are the
one of the most famous,
yeah,
the most famous midrashim, a very powerful midrash in Breshit Rabbah. It says that because the Torah begins with, when God said, let there be light, right? And the light was. The midrash turns that the light there was something before. There was something before the before, and the person who I think, if I remember correctly, is Rabbi Abba, who mentioned as the Darshan, says, what was God doing? God was Boreh Olamot Umacharivan. God was creating and destroying worlds before this world. And then he gets to this one and says, V'hinei tov me'od. Says, okay, I had 37 drafts, and the 38th one, or whatever it is, God is always going to be creating and destroying, and the same dynamic is in Genesis too, because the Noah story is also a kind of create the world, destroy the world, create the world, destroy the world, create again, and continually try again. And I think that Judaism, by the time something we recognize as Judaism comes along, by a post-biblical religion, the temple has been destroyed in the 6th century BCE. Then at the eve of what we would call the rabbinic period in the year 70, the temple's destroyed again. I think we have a really strong sense that the world is continually crashing and being rebuilt, crashing and being rebuilt, crashing and being rebuilt. And I would say that is one of the strengths of Judaism, of the religion that we've inherited, is that it knows how to deal with defeat and knows how to give you the power to start again. So I would answer your question, Elliot, by saying, in the shadow of what's going on in Israel is very, very real, disturbing, and troubling right now. I would say that anybody who, by the time any Jew read the Torah and understood that the Mishkan was prefiguring the Beit HaMikdash that Solomon would build, that is destroyed at the end of the Torah, of the biblical period in the 6th century BCE. Any Jew who has received this story knows, we built this amazing place and the divine presence was there. It's gonna get destroyed and you're gonna have to bounce back. Yeah. And our powers to be able to bounce back, we hope we have it in us for another round.
No,
it's pretty scary.
So here, here's where I kind of, it's not that I push back. I would say we don't want to. Nobody wants to live through that, and nobody, God forbid it should ever get to that. And that's the point of danger that we're at. We are approaching liminal moments where things seem to be possibly damaged. Damage could be on a scale of a skirmish, and damage could be cataclysmic. Okay, God forbid it should be that way, but we're existing in a moment of real tremulousness, and so you and I, we're all shaped by the tradition in which we know that great moments, great climactic moments happen and they get crushed. And so we're primed to experience that. And as difficult as it is to live through it, we all know, and I think this is what you're saying, we all know that we're going to recover and it's going to be okay. And I just don't want to live through it. That's the problem. I just don't want to live through it's just very, very difficult. So I'm wondering if the echo of this is in this ending chapter, that they're building go ahead, Barry.
I think we need to be cautious and clear that inevitability is a look back. Nothing is inevitable as it unfolds in terms of these kinds of processes. So we look back and say that the destruction of the temple was inevitable, but I don't know that people living through it saw it quite like that way.
Well, I asked you before we started whether or not the Civil War in America was inevitable, right? Because it's
so again, I think that was a backward look, that once the Civil War erupts, we could see how it's hard to believe that it could have been avoided. But I don't know that the people who were living at that time actually thought it was inevitable. You know, you read stories, especially during the Civil War itself, the opening battles of the war, people would come and picnic on the grounds to watch the battle. I don't think they thought that something all that terrible was happening if you're having lunch while other people are being killed.
But why don't we say, though, of course this is correct, and as history is unfolding, you can't be fatalistic about it. You have to say, oh my goodness, we have to try to avert this disaster. But especially like the Civil War is an interesting example, because I think that we can look at it with this retrospective look and say that there were certain fundamental tensions and instabilities that were not going to go on forever between slave and free, between agrarian South and commercial North, or whatever it was. It wasn't inevitable if people had made different choices, but the structural instabilities were so significant that it led in a very direct way. And so you might want to ask yourself, now I'm not going to talk about Israel per se, but to say about the religious dimension, the religious story of the book of Exodus, and we are this week concluding Exodus and heading into Leviticus. What is the whole sweep of Exodus? You had incredible, once in a cosmos experiences of divine revelation. You were led by a pillar of fire and a pillar of cloud. God was incredibly present. God was at the mountain was smoking. You had experiences that were of intimacy and intensity that are never to be replicated. By the way, when they go away, you're still a human being. You're still a mortal human being with all your flaws. And so I would say that the way this works for me on a spiritual level is that to be a religious person is to have both the feelings of, wow, you can have peak experiences, you can have moments that leave you feeling like, yes, I understand in a different way than I did before. I'm coming away with real insight, with real sanctity, with real holiness, and you're not going to be able to keep it up. You're going to fall into normal life. So I would say that is the golden calf inevitable? Well, maybe the golden calf is a poetic rendering of the reality that you can't live at Sinai forever, and sometimes you're going to go off the path. And so it's inevitable in the sense that it's perhaps a poetic figure for human failure, which is you're just not going to be able to keep the faith all the time.
I think it's inevitable in a different way. I think that, go back a few weeks ago when we started reading about the building of the Mishkan. So putting out that idea, putting a visual complex in front of people, got that imagination into focus on the tangible. Once that happens, it's inevitable. And forgive me for being attuned to the tragic dimension of this. I'm recalling with a bit of humor, when Jacob meets Rachel at the well, okay? So he cries. It's such a beautiful moment, right? He cries. He's in love with her. And so what do the rabbis say? Do you know what you remember the Midrash? The Midrash says, what is he crying? He's crying about the temple.
Well, that's with Joseph and Benjamin also.
And also, right, he's crying because he understands that he has a vision that she's going to die, okay? So here, the moment of this exuberance is the moment when he gets an insight, a prophetic insight, according to the rabbis, that the woman that he loves is going to die in childbirth. I mean, in the most tragic way possible, okay? So yeah, it's all over the Tanakh. It's all over, the Torah. And what I want to say, it's here too. It's here too. It's here in this exuberant chapter where every single, refrain is Kasher Tziv Adonai et Moshe, Kasher Tziv Adonai et Moshe, 7 times, 49 verbs. It's all perfect. The perfect Mishkan is there. And yet there are 3,000 families that lost, husbands and fathers because of the skirmish, that they're not celebrating so much. They're wounded, they're grieving in the moment that Israel is, kind of celebrating this. And so we'll go to the punchline of the whole book. So at that moment, it's all complete. The cloud comes over the tent of meeting, and God's presence fills the Mishkan. And then and he can't get in there. He can't get in there because it's so full of God's smoke. So I want to say that wow, that's a great moment. It's a moment of completion, but I also want to say it's a tragic moment. That's the tragedy. You can't be in there. You can't.
Well,
because you, Moses, are coming. You're not able to enter into that place because of your humanity at this point. The place is soaked with God, and there's a vestige of that skirmish on you. The violence is on you, Moses, and sorry, you stay outside right now. That's my take.
so another way to look at it is that it's actually a moment of redemption, because we have to imagine Moses not being able to get into the Ohel Moed. So what is he left to do? He must rejoin the people, of whom he is the designated leader.
Yes.
And the divine reassurance is that wherever you go, God speaking now, I will be with you by day and by night to lead you.
Okay.
And I think that's a powerful ending to the book of Exodus. And, ironically, when we begin Vayikra next week, it's rather a prosaic thing. All right, here are a bunch of animals you have to kill.
Yeah, but I also think, though, that, what could work well with what Elliot said, and it is interesting. I just want to add the small halachic detail, which was never very relevant until modern times, the state of Israel, not today's crisis, but it's because the Kohanim, when they give the blessing of the people, they raise their hands in the blessing of peace. There's a law that if you've ever murdered somebody, or if you ever
can't do it,
committed homicide, you can't do it. You can't participate in the blessing of peace. So perhaps there is a way in which Moshe is kept out of the Mishkan because of that violent.
Okay, so I mean, it works homiletically here. It didn't, he got up to, at the top of Mount Sinai. He'd already killed an Egyptian, when by the time he's up on Mount Sinai. But this is after and he's had his experience with God too, So I'm not sure, if my dad lines up here, but I like
it is interesting. I mean, Moses and Aaron are a team. Moses is the prophet, Aaron is the priest. As it says in the Talmud, in Tractate Sanhedrin, Moshe is the prophet. He's Yikov Hadin et Hahar. The law should pierce the mountain. I don't care. And Aaron, the priest, is Ohev Shalom v'rodef Shalom. He loves peace. He pursues peace, and he's willing to. He's the avatar, not of let the law pierce the mountain. He's the avatar of compromise. And he says, listen, we got to get along here. We got to manage to work it out. So maybe Moshe is, his zealousness, his Pinchasness, his Eliyahu-ness is a little bloody, and he can't come in right now. And Aaron is going to belong in the tabernacle, not Moshe.
Okay.
On the other hand, let's just note one thing, which is that the first words of the book of Vayikra, which means "and he called," the God called to Moshe and invites him into the tabernacle. I think that there's a very powerful. The content of Vayikra is prosaic, as Barry said, but the very first line is a bridge
Me
between the end
ohel
of
moed.
Exodus.
Me ohel
Yes.
moed. He calls him from Ohel, so he's outside. He's still outside Ohel moed.
No, God calls Moshe. God calls Moshe.
Vayikra
Moshe Vaydaber elav me'ohel moed lemor. God calls to Moshe. God's in the ohel moed and says, "Come on in."
doesn't say that.
It doesn't exactly say.
You guys always accuse me.
I could make it nicer, but you are right. It
There
doesn't
you go.
exactly.
Okay. So, all right, hold that idea. So I want to make this leap here to the extra portion that we read for Hachodesh, chapter 12 of the book of Exodus, which is, a very important passage getting us ready for Pesach. Hachodesh hazeh lachem. It reminds us that, of the first Pesach, the Korban Pesach that was happening in the home. And I want to run this one by you, which is that there's some brokenness even in that moment too. Look at the first verse. Hachodesh hazeh lachem rosh chodeshim. This shall be your first of your months. Rishon hu lachem lechodshei hashana. Okay, we get a calendar. Lots we could say about that in terms of the civilizing nature of organizing time. Leave that. Dabru el b'nei el kol adat Yisrael lemor. Speak to the entire congregation to say, B'esor lechodesh hazeh yichud lachem. On the 10th day, take for you ish sel levet avot sel abayit. Everybody takes a sheep. Lots to say about that too in terms of the family. But then the next, v'im yimat habayit miyot miseh. But if you don't have enough people in your household to for whom you can feed an entire lamb, what do?
Mm-hmm.
You go to the next
one. Your neighbor.
You go to your next one. Okay.
Right, but Elliot, I think you're missing perhaps something fundamental here. Why is it that they have to match the lamb up with the families? It's because nothing can be left over from this lamb.
Okay.
That the reason why the family of a few has to join with the larger family is to make sure that the complete lamb, not the broken lamb, is completely eaten. And in the further instruction, the Korban Pesach has to be without broken bones as well.
Okay.
So I think that your point in general works, but the details of the sacrifice, I think, emphasize the sense of completion that you have to at least recognize before you tell me.
I get it. Okay. Before you tell me what? Sorry.
That I'm wrong.
You're wrong. I don't think you're wrong.
We'll go through it and then we'll explain.
I don't think you're wrong at all. I just think I'm right. No, what I want to say is that I want to live in that family for a moment that doesn't have enough people to eat a whole lamb. Okay, so who is that family and why do they exist and what's the story here? So I'm going to tell a story. I'm going to tell a story about the woman whose husband was crushed to death under bricks, and whose children are scraggly children, and she has to join with another family because there's nobody. Her family has been broken, okay, and there are dozens of families like that. And look, we all live in communities, and we know, and this is why this is very painful, because every single one of us knows of people who have broken lives like this, and they have no one to join with. So I'm seeing a story in here in which the Korban Pesach, the way it is being unfolded to people as a great moment, a complete moment, a moment where you're gonna eat this completely, is also a moment that recognizes a certain kind of brokenness that goes in the people, because it counts for those people that don't have anybody. Go ahead.
All right, what I would like to suggest, instead of brokenness, that we talk about instability.
Instability. Okay.
That someone who has gone through loss is in an unstable situation. And the first Pesach alerts us to the fact that everyone is unstable. Because the verse that speaks to me is, I think, verse 8. V'achlu et habasar b'layla hazet li'esh masod amorim yochluhu.
Translate.
It's verse 11. V'chacha tochlu oto b'nechem chagurim na'lechem v'raglechem u'malkalchem b'yedchem v'achaltem oto b'chipazon pesach hu l'Adonai. That
Translate.
everyone who eats of the Pesach, so you have to, this is how you
Roast
should
it?
eat it, with your loins girded, with sandals on your feet, and the staff in your hand, and you eat it in a rush, because this is the Lord's Passover sacrifice. So that everyone is eating in the sense of anticipation that they're not going to be where they are right now for very long. That the world, they're leaving a world behind them, right? This is the night or the morning of the Exodus, depending on which biblical tradition you think is best. And everyone is united in this. The woman, in your description, who has lost her husband under the pile of bricks, is as unstable as everyone else, because everyone is unmoored here. They're all in the process of moving.
This is we got a little Leonard Cohen here, and everybody's favorite line and anthem. Forget your perfect offering. There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in.
Yes.
And so we do have that sense of Pesach, this great covenantal celebration, and the very description of it connotes, an attention to our lonely and scraggly neighbors. There's this like rabbinic trope or a little bit rabbinic move, Pesach Mitzrayim and Pesach Dorot. There's the difference between Passover as practiced in that first time in Egypt and Passover in all the subsequent generations. And so we don't put, the blood on the doorposts of our own houses. We don't do all that stuff that Barry just said with the shoes on your feet and your staff on your hand. But I'm going to assume that the description of the first Pesach Mitzrayim here in Exodus 12 must have been, in fact, the stage directions at different points in Jewish history, not just one time in Egypt. They probably indeed at different times celebrated this holiday in the posture and even the costume and the whole manner of people scurrying out of slavery, including this bit about the sandals and the staff and the belt on or whatever it is, and maybe at certain points even smeared the blood on their houses.
Right. Except, and that we've had this debate before. I don't think that they end up eating it, and they because they everything happens. So in the very next chapter when it's Vayhi b'chatzi alayla, and the Makat Bechorot is happening, they have to leave immediately, and while the text doesn't
smear the blood,
they smeared the blood, but the lamb is still roasting. Okay, it's still in the tandoor. It's still and their homes. We've talked about also the home became a kind of altar to them. The smearing of the blood is a consecration of the home as an altar, and so what you have is again along this theme of it was supposed to be a meal that everyone ate al matzot umrarim yochlu. They ate the meat with the bread, the unleavened bread, and the bitter herbs, but they ended up eating nothing. They ended up going out on an empty stomach, and the whole event itself, as dislocating as it already is, was even more dislocating, was even more, broken, right? And what's amazing about it is that they managed to get through. I love that. That's it's the moment that despite it not having gone to plan, it still happens. And maybe for me it's a very emotional message, which says life doesn't always go along your plan A, and we do have the plan Bs, and the Exodus is a plan B, and the Egel is a plan B, and the Mishkan is a plan B here. And I want to see, even go back to the end of Vayakhel Pekudei. He goes in, and it's anticipating that I'm going to go in there, and no, you're not going to go in. The plan B is you're going to stay outside. I don't. Should I give that sermon?
Well, maybe some of the things perhaps are yes, there are plan Bs and Cs in these things, but maybe some of the things are also just a surprise. Like Moshe doesn't know everything. We will see this in Parshat Shmini when Nadav and Avihu were killed, and Moses doesn't know what to do, and he gives some inappropriate orders, and Aaron says to him, what he says, and we'll see that in a couple of weeks. So the openness to surprise and the expectation that I know exactly how this is going to go, that's why you have that is a delusion, that's false, and that's why you have plan B, C's, and D's. But I want to just note at the end of chapter 39, there's just a really lovely passage. They bring the tabernacle to Moshe.
Okay.
Vayaviu et hamishkan el Moshe, verse 33, 39-33. Vayaviu et hamishkan el Moshe. They bring the tabernacle to Moshe, and then it begins to enumerate all the stuff that happens. The furnishings and the tent and the furnishings, the clasps, the planks, the bows, the sockets, the posts, the skins, the ark, the poles, all the table, the utensils, the menorah, everything in there. And just as the Lord commanded Moses, so the Israelites did all the work. And then the last verse in that chapter, 43.
Nice.
Vayar Moshe kol hamlacha, and Moses saw all the work. V'hinei asu ota ka'asher tziva Adonai kein asu. And they did it just as God had said. Vayivarech otam Moshe, and Moses blessed them. And that blessing is part of the. I don't know. You used the word exuberance before. I don't know that exuberance is exactly the right word for this moment. There is a stately affirmation. Moses gives them a great big gigantic yes, and the rabbinic comment is that the blessing, he says, "Yehi ratzon shetashra shechina b'maaseh yedechem." May it be God's will that the divine presence will rest upon your hands, rest upon the work of your hands.
Jeremy, you make it sound more British than Middle Eastern.
No,
well, I am thinking maybe it's a little British. It's British or Yiddish. It's Yiddish and British.
I want to. So you're saying Moses is kind of giving a shechianu there, okay? And I want to just amplify. There's joy, beautiful joy, and then every time we stand up with our congregants and say a shechianu, and they've reached an important milestone, there's a little crack in the voice. There's a tear also, and there's some sadness here. I cannot help but think that there's something, because it's so charged this moment. It's just not all pure joy. You guys, we were at a wedding. You guys were bawling your eyes out at this wedding. People were crying. It's not because it was so sad, but it was because we were just so happy. Right?
Well, it's bitter. It is bittersweet. I mean, obviously, it was overwhelming joy, and the Kalmanovsky family we are definitely weepers. We were all weeping like nobody's business, but
you made it everyone's business.
It is also true that, I mean, when there's an Uf Gozal quality to these things too.
Sure.
Fly away, little bird. When your first child goes and gets married and has his own wife and his own family and his own home, you also recognize that, there's enormous, immense, life-affirming joy. This is what you want. And other phases of your life, the door is closing on, and you're going to miss them.
Right. And I think you have to take it a step further, because what makes the Shechianu so powerful and these life cycle events is that they're always multi-generational. And the older generation always has a sense of wistfulness, not only because the door is closing, but the one that's opening is the door of death, that you get closer. And I think that, again, not to make too much of a point of this, that the brokenness that you're suggesting is rooted in uncertainty.
Yeah.
That what really makes us anxious is that we're not sure what actually is going to happen, including our own death, right? We know we're going to die, but we don't know when or where or how exactly. And that can be bothersome. And so one of the things we look to religion for is to anchor us in this world, to give us some stability, to give us some tools to counter the precarious nature of life itself, so that we can actually experience joy. Otherwise, it would just be despair.
You know,
So-
and we did not in our conversation today, before we started recording, you know, we sort of wondered whether or not we were going to get more specific about the crisis, the quote unquote constitutional crisis in Israel. It's quote unquote because there is no formal constitution. The crisis over a, you know, I'll go out on a limb and say dangerous, fascistic, racist trends within the government. We didn't really get to that, and that's fine. But one of the things that is uncertain about this is that we are all, I think the three of us, and I think Jews worldwide, and the hundreds of thousands of people who are protesting in Israel, and the hundreds of thousands of people who oppose those who are protesting in Israel, we do feel like we're at a very momentous, you know, crossroads, and we really don't know what's going to happen. And it does feel like we are there's some like seismic tremors going on right now, and so that feeling of we've built a Mishkan, you know, what was it Benjamin Franklin say? You know, you
A republic if you can keep it.
If you can keep it, yeah.
I quoted him. My classes. Well, I'm usually the one that brings people down here, but I want to.
Well, Suzanne brings you down.
No, I want to end on a higher note. Which,
We're getting all
I want to end on a higher note that the building is ready, the Mishkan is ready, the cloud fills it up. I'll go with the positive here that God is delighting to be there, and that the journey is going to begin. And I think what makes me personally wistful about reaching the end of this book, Shmot, is that look how far we've gone. Look where we are, and Hazak Hazak VeNithazek, brethren. You know, we give each other strength by studying together and by sharing these thoughts, as difficult and painful as they can be sometimes, and worrisome. You know, we do this with the prayer that that there will be a restored sanity within Israel, that these forces that are on track for collision will hold on, will get a grip, and will find what unites the society more, and that the voices of conciliation will penetrate within the society. That definitely is our hope, and that's certainly the thing that we are praying for. We join with Jews throughout the world praying for all of that, and enjoying this milestone in the journey of Torah for this year. What can we say? We're come to the end of our
Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. We thank our viewers and listeners. Always great to have you. We look forward to seeing you again. Shabbat Shalom from our
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.